Our next talk is by Erin Kenneally. Erin Kenneally is a program manager in the Cybersecurity Division for the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, Science and Technology Directorate. Her portfolio comprises cybersecurity research infrastructure, privacy, security economics, and technology ethics. She manages the Impact or Information Marketplace for Policy and Analysis of Cyber Risk and Trust, CYRI or Cyber Risk Economics, and Data Privacy Programs. Kenneally is founder and CEO of Alchemy, Inc., and served as technology law specialist at the International Computer Science Institute and the Center for Internet Data Analysis and Center for Evidence-Based Security Research at the University of California, San Diego. Erin is a licensed attorney specializing in information technology law, including privacy technology, data protection, artificial intelligence ethics and legal risk, trusted information sharing, technology policy, cybercrime, data ethics, and emergent IT legal risks. She holds Juris Doctorate and Masters of Forensic Sciences degrees and is a graduate of Syracuse University and the George Washington University. Please join me in welcoming Erin to the stage for Responsible Innovation for Cybersecurity AI.
Thank you. Gosh, I would have made that bio a lot shorter had I known they were going to actually read it here. In any case, we heard some interesting perspectives earlier today. I'm going to take a little bit of a different tact and level up a little bit and talk about the notion of trust. We heard about it a little bit in our previous talk. Talk about the notion of enabling the trusted application of artificial intelligence. And I like to use this framework, which I call the body, mind, and soul of cybersecurity AI. The body being research and development and data, the mind being cyber risk economics, and the soul being ethics. So just leveling back even more, I think it's important to sort of get an understanding of the framework within which AI risk is being played out, because it offers an opportunity to see where we're going. So here's how I like to look at it. You've got the rate of change of what I call our ordering forces. So this is like technology and law. We first start with the rapidly advancing kind of leftward-facing hockey stick, which represents our capabilities, the rate of change of technology, right? And we know it's, again, approaching kind of Moore's Law's trajectory. At the bottom, you've got not quite flatlining, slightly sloping line that represents our expectations. And this is the law. This is things like privacy, data protection, civil rights, and civil liberties. And in the middle here, these are all the context within which AI is being played out, right? So you have things like AI being used for reputation scoring. Judging the security score of organizations is a new one. We're already familiar with credit scoring. We've got things like social scoring going on in China. Also, we have recommender systems, right? So think about anything that we search on, our news feeds. Really what is shaping our attention economy is being driven by AI. Then you've got classification and prediction. Anything from disease to likelihood to commit a crime, to your potential as an employee, to your risk from an insurance perspective, to understanding, hey, is this traffic malicious traffic or not? And you've got autonomous devices as well. So things like UAVs, vehicles, weapons. And this is all sort of driven by the digitization of information that allows the gathering and observation and surveillance of this information. So this whole area is what I consider this zone of risk, right? So no longer is AI providing just affordances, spell checking, auto spell checking your documents. We all know this. But it is working with, deciding and acting for, by, and with humans. And it impacts our rights and our interests. The result there is AI is creating control and information asymmetry. So the folks who are using AI oftentimes are using it in a very subjective, gated, opaque, unilateral way. So things like, the use of AI to protect my right to privacy may run up against your right to use AI to protect your security, your employer's right to use it to prevent against economic espionage, the government's interest in protecting critical infrastructure and defending our systems. The end result also is we've got uncertain impacts, right? So low and slow harm, oftentimes there's a latency. You can't always tell when these AI systems are producing harm. And then trying to correlate and prove causation after the fact is very difficult. So what's the point? The point is that in this risk zone, this delta between what we're expected to do, what we're allowed to do, and what we're capable of doing, this delta is increasing. And so what? There's at least 3 implications here. We've got one, inefficient avoidance of risk. So me as a company owner, me as an individual citizen, knowing when, if, and how I can deploy AI to stay on the right side of the law is one area. Secondly, we've got increasing tensions between legitimate right holders. This is what I mentioned before, privacy versus security versus First Amendment free speech rights. And then finally, I think the third ramification is this undermining of trust in our ordering forces. So people, receding from the marketplace if they don't trust the technology. People going rogue and extrajudicial and taking the law into their own hands. So these are some of the implications here of the system we're dealing with. So how do we close this gap? These are the 3 areas that I'm going to talk about. There are 4 areas here. I'm only going to speak to 3 of them. The first one is R&D, right? I work in an R&D organization, so this is near and dear to me. So addressing AI development at the pre-competitive stage is very important. We can suss out a lot of these situations that may have life-threatening impacts at the early stage. Secondly, this was mentioned in the earlier conversation, we're rushing ahead to optimize AI for efficiency when actually we should be optimizing for coordination with humans. No better place to do this than in the R&D realm. We're dealing with generalizable learning challenges. R&D is a great place to address this as well. So if I develop an effective anomaly detection system that is very effective at addressing host level risk, I can't just take that AI, that algorithm, and roll it up linearly to address systemic risk without some major implications. Translating Homeland Security and defense problems into forms that are addressable by AI is an important one. You're right, we're good at deploying AI for facial recognition and even for autonomous vehicles, but cybersecurity is really not a well-defined problem for AI at this point in time. You're dealing with dynamic code, you're dealing with a dynamic attack surface, and you're dealing with dynamic adaptation mechanisms as well. We've heard about the robustness concerns here. AI is susceptible to pre- and post-training attacks. This is even prevalent with image recognition, where if you change one pixel in an image of a panda, it will still look like a panda to the human beings, but AI will recognize it as a gibbon. And there's a ton of circumstances like that. Adoption challenges are another one, right? So in order for organizations, right, you just can't take a widget, throw it into an organization and hope it'll work. You've got to get the executives on board to understand it, to be able to understand how it impacts the folks who work for them, because at the end of the day, their own performance assessments are going to be put on the line if they're relying on this technology. And then finally, R&D is a perfect place to straddle what I call the valleys of death, which is taking very good AI research from the laboratory from research land into vendor land, going from vendor land to government land as well. And this is where you need partnerships, and the R&D community is well situated to handle this. So moving the next part of the body, as it were, moving on to data. Right? There are statistics all over the place, and we rarely agree on any statistics. I think the one we can agree on is that exactly 0% of effective R&D, and AI R&D in particular here, can be done without good data, right? So the open secret of effective R&D is that we need real-world data to develop and test and evaluate our algorithms. People ask me, and I'll talk about this in a minute, one of the programs that I fund, I actually fund people to go out and find and collect and make available data for AI cybersecurity research. And they say, well, gosh, we're living in this big data world. How is data a problem? Well, it might grow on trees. It's still got to be picked and sorted and trucked and bottled. None of that is cost-free. And if you've ever tried to roll your own data, unless you're with a major platform service provider, you know how difficult that is. Most folks, if you're in small, medium businesses, and certainly in the academic research world, are on what I call datacade. Not only do you need data, but you need massively labeled training data as well. And that, again, is not cost-free, doesn't just happen. We need to have this data available in a scalable and a sustainable way. We can't rely on, negotiating data sharing agreements every time researchers need to use this data. We need to establish taxonomies and standards for this data itself so that the machines can actually speak to it, so that results can be compared apples to apples. Otherwise, we're just talking different languages. And I think we need the private sector to step up and share more data with the research community, especially when we're talking about the major platform providers. This is a perfect opportunity also. Another program I fund is data privacy. There's a ton of new cutting-edge data privacy technologies out there that we need to transfer from the lab into the real world to address some of these privacy concerns that prevent us from sharing data so that we can have the massively labeled training data sets. So if we don't do that, what do we end up with? Well, we end up chasing toy problems. I see this all the time. Researchers pitching me for money to perform their research, and they can't get data, so they go after toy problems. Secondly, if we don't address the data problem, we're increasing the risk that the data that we do use introduces fairness, accuracy, bias, and discrimination concerns. And then I talked about this earlier, just exacerbating this knowledge and control gap. Kind of the rich get richer. If you're putting out, if you have platforms to collect the data that's making the models better, and it becomes this kind of virtuous cycle, growing asymmetry between big platform providers and kind of the rest of the world. It's kind of the rich get richer, and we've got the 90 and 10% rule going on here. So quickly, I'll talk to you about how we're actually walking the talk here. Again, I mentioned Impact program that I run. And this has become kind of a worn meme at this point in time about data being the world's most valuable resource, comparable to oil. Well, I'm here to say, unless you're with a big platform provider, winter is here. And that is actually what a motivation for this program. I mentioned this a little bit earlier as well. So what are the need space that we're going after here? Number one, valuable data is not free. It either comes at a high monetary cost or a high legal cost. In order to operationalize sharing, as a lawyer, I can say this, that we optimize for trust. Lawyers don't like issues of first impression, right? So establishing a system where we've got everybody agreeing to the same terms is very efficient. And the technologists, they don't want to spend their time mucking around cleaning up data. They just want the data that they need to go and run their experiments, build their tools, test their technologies. So none of that is easy. The impact system itself, basically we serve as a mediator between a two-sided market. So we've got a distributed network of users, and the users are in academia and industry and government on an international level. And the other side, I've got a federated network of data providers. All of this is sort of bound together through our portal mechanism. I'll show you a screenshot in a second. Essentially what we try and do is help folks find, get, use, and data and tools related to cybersecurity, and we're adding AI cybersecurity capabilities at the moment as well. Again, all bound together by these business rules, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel, spend 6 months speaking with lawyers from different organizations trying to negotiate MOAs and NDAs and whatnot. Quick screenshot, we rely heavily on kind of network layer data, so network telemetry. We've certainly got our share of attack data, cybercrime data, and some defense data as well. We're always looking for new sources of data, and we really posit ourselves as kind of a Geneva, as it were, to provide data freely for the community. And we do, again, have probably 3,500 users right now across the different sectors. Screenshot, we try to model our system a la Amazon. So instead of shopping for products, you're shopping for data. Here you can free text search, you can filter search on the left. And here, this was a search on cyber attack, denial of service from 2017, and you can see some of the results. The idea is, check mark the box for the data that you want, put it in your shopping cart, and you're on your way. What are our success elements here? I think there are, I don't mean to say that there aren't other entities that are sharing data for AI cybersecurity. I think this well-rounded picture is what makes us unique. And we're going to go through this picture just one more time for the heck of it. All right, moving on to the next section here, the spirit. And here we're going to talk a little bit about ethics. All right, so it's past noon in Ireland. Let's do a pub quiz. All right, which involves the use of AI to anonymously observe, collect, and exploit data and/or systems without the subject's awareness or control, right? So I'm going to give you some scenarios. Is it A, cyber espionage and surveillance by industry? Is it advertising and data brokering by industry, using AI in this capacity? Do vendors use AI for targeted services and content? Does the government use it to monitor? Do adversaries use AI in a range of different manners? Swarm bots, polymorphic malware, ransomware as a service, things like that. Security R&D and SecOps, are they using AI to fulfill their mission? Or is it all of the above? So how many people say A, B, C, D, E, F, G? Smart crowd here. Spoiler alert. Well done. So what's the common thread here? So we're dealing with a tension of interest that I had mentioned earlier. You've got opaque decisions and actions occurring in all of these situations. You've got foreseeable negative impacts, and you've really got no process or notice to the people whose rights and interests are involved. And so you might ask yourself, well, so what? Who cares? Why? Well, certainly a SecOps folk or a cybersecurity researcher and developer doesn't want to be confused with an industry nation state or a hacker, right? So how do we differentiate when a lot of times our laws are unclear in this regard? The market is not necessarily discouraging between or differentiating between these actors and these acts. And technology is used both for good and bad. My argument here is this is a perfect place for ethics to enter into the picture. It's a way for us to sort of galvanize around, what is it that we can commonly agree on in terms of what is right and wrong, and eventually, we can harden that up and it can infiltrate up into our laws. But I think we need to start with ethics. A framework to think about ethics, you've probably heard a lot about it. I think it's still being dealt with at a very rather superficial level, unless you're doing a deep dive on it, is think of it as principles, applications, and enforcement. So from a principles perspective, there's these notions of transparency, explainability, fairness you'll hear about. There's been a number of things done from a human rights ethics declaration standpoint, and we've got a ton of organizations and societies that are developing frameworks. What we're really lacking is a shared frame of reference. I don't mean to say that we have to come up with one uber framework that everyone agrees upon, but I think there's a dilution of efforts and we need to start converging. From an application standpoint, we're doing less well, which is to say we've got some best practices starting to scratch the surface from an ethical impact assessment perspective, starting to build some enabling tools. I think Accenture, either IBM or Intel has come out with tools, maybe even Google. But we are lacking kind of writ large ethics management. From an enforcement standpoint, we're doing very poorly. I think it's natural to kind of lean on the institutional review boards, the ethic review boards that exist already and deal with kind of these ethical issues. But you look to things like program committees or funding organizations as forcing functions to try and enforce ethical issues. We've got some laws that have been put forward recently, the Algorithmic Accountability Act, there's the Detour Act, and I think there's another one that came out a couple weeks ago, the BAD Act. They're all, again, trying to go after the enforcement issue, but largely the question now is governance and incentives. We've got huge gaps in that area. I'll quickly just note here, and that's mud, not the output of someone's intestines. What I'm trying to bad graphics here, but what I'm trying to say is the enforcement leg is on shaky ground, right? This notion of algorithmic accountability, you'll hear a lot about it. What is it really? It's really proactive risk management. It's the ability to assess and control and redress algorithmic systems. And everyone wants, the benefit of beneficial outcomes of algorithms. That's not anything that people are fighting about. But the issue is, how do we go about implementing this accountability? There's kind of two schools of thought here. One is permissionless innovation, and that's largely what's driven the US economy, which basically says let's lead with innovation. We trust that there'll be beneficial and largely ethical results from the deployment of AI first. And if there are problems and we do experience some harm, then we'll carve out some specific niches where we'll regulate this. Juxtaposed to the precautionary principle, which is much more widely prevalent in Europe. You see this through the GDPR and a lot of folks who are pushing algorithmic accountability here, which basically says, prove it through explainability and transparency that your algorithm does what it says it does, that you can prove that the intent actually plays out that way. So there's a bunch of criticisms here. I won't go through all of them because I'm nearly out of time and I'm going to have to speed up here. The one big one is, hey, look, we don't hold humans to this standard because humans bring bias into their decision-making and their actions all the time, right? So that's a pushback. Another one that I'll quickly mention is knowing, the parameters and the weights and the features of an algorithm doesn't mean that you know how it's going to act in the wild. And we've seen this where we've had subject matter experts argue about what an algorithm does when they can see the code right in front of their faces. Just blow through here. We can take three different approaches from the enforcement. We can go bottom up, we can go top down, or we can go sideways and use the reputation lever. We took the bottom up approach. We built a tool, the Cyber Risk Ethics Decision Support Tool. It's really built on this notion of ethical principles around a series of risk factors produced in a wizard-type fashion to people who are building AI technologies to enable them. Look, it's not about producing a right or wrong answer. It's helping them think through the ethics of what they're doing. This is just a quick run-through on what the tool. We're in alpha public version now. If anyone here is interested, actually, we're moving into the next phase, building out a more AI robust version of it. And if anyone's interested in engaging, please let me know. The last thing I'll talk about here is AI risk economics. And real quickly, what is AI bringing the adversary? For the most part, it's increasing both the degree and the kind of efficiency that the adversaries have, right? So more people can be attackers. There's more targets to go after. The attack rate, scope, and scale increases. It also decreases the cost, helps decrease the cost of attacks, and increases the return on the attacks. From the new threat perspective, we're dealing with things like polymorphic malware, where we're no longer relying on hard-coded static algorithms. This AI, and you'll hear about this the rest of the day as well, it's being used to analyze behaviors and moods and sow information chaos. So layer this, so we're already dealing with a situation where our understanding of cyber risk exposure is poor. And so you're going to layer on top of this even more risky exposure and enabling our adversaries. So in my cyber risk economics, one of the things that we're looking at is, certainly our questions outweigh our answers. Understanding things like what drives the risk investment. Is it peer pressure? Is it liability? Is it compliance cost? Is it funding, whether it be VCs or government funding? How do we measure the effectiveness of our controls, right? We don't know this. We're spending billions of dollars on widgets and services from a security perspective, and an AI security perspective, it's going to be even more. Yet we don't have a good idea about outcomes. In medicine, we're moving towards an outcome-based approach. I think we need to do that in cybersecurity as well. Exposure, we know that there's a lot of negative externalities. You know, I can put out a piece of buggy software and it can take down the global, most of the global operating environments for you know, a major shipping company. This is what happened with NotPetya when an Eastern European accounting software got hosed. And the other thing to point out here is that in order to appropriately allocate responsibility, we need to understand where these negative externalities lay. Because if I'm putting out something that harms a lot of people and I'm not being held responsible, then the system doesn't work. What's the effective mix of cybersecurity investment? Is it transferring it through insurance? Is it balance sheet reserves? Is it investing in controls? Are there sufficient incentives to address cybersecurity, right? So tax incentives, subsidies, liability, standards, procurement preferences. You know, what are our policy levers here? And then this is again, we need more data and methodology and tools to make better decisions. Quick screenshot of a document that we put out. I think it would be helpful in this space as well, where we look at the high order questions to address. And my last slide here is really what we're dealing with, whether it's a vendor trying to identify a consumer through the use of various devices and identify them, or you've got attackers and defenders. It really is the cat and mouse game raised to the power of data science. It's the same game raised to those stakes. So the motive, means, and opportunity mirror each other. Bad guys want more efficient and more effective ways of attacking and using AI to do this. Good guys do as well. The bad guys want to use AI to automate their reconnaissance and their attack. Good guys want to use AI for their threat detection and response. Last couple comments. We have to remember trust was not a design goal of the internet. It wasn't until the spammers and the exploiters and the hackers kind of ruined it, and we had to start building in controls after the fact. I think there's a lesson to be learned there as well with regards to building in AI trust at the front end. I was recently asked on a panel what will make or break the internet with regards to AI, and I think it's the race to the bottom. That will break the internet, will break a lot of things with regards to our deployment of AI, which is to say the failure of our ordering forces, so the law, technology, and the market, to keep our capabilities in line with our expectations vis-a-vis that initial chart that I showed. And then finally, don't forget skills, education, and training is super important. With that, thank you for your time. My contact information is here. I'll be around, and I look forward to speaking with you.